Welcome back to another video of Your Daily Scales. Now, basically, this is a series where I teach how to play basically all of the scales on the piano, all the major scales for a beginning piano student. And so basically that's what this series is, and it's also a bit of a companion series because I'm going to be teaching some really simple classical music in the future as well. And if that classical piece happens to be in one of these major keys, I'll say to come back if you don't already know how to play this major key and you don't already know the scale very well, to come back and watch one of these videos and practice on the major scale that is in that key. And so that's kind of what these videos are used for. And basically in every video, I teach you a different scale. So let's take a look at what today's scale is. So the scale that we're going to be looking at today is B flat major, and I thought I'd show you the sheet music for it first so you can look at the fingering and look at the notes on the sheet music, and then after I just kind of walk you through what fingers to play on what notes, I will show you how to play it on the keyboard. So the first note that we play, of course, is B flat, and we're going to want to play that in the right hand with our fourth finger, and then we're going to want to tuck our thumb under to C. Now the reason that we're starting off with the fourth finger, which is a strange finger to be starting off with in the right hand, we start off with 4 because we end on 4, and what would happen is if we wanted to go up to a second octave above and keep going, when we're on this B flat, we'd want to tuck our thumb under to C and keep going up the scale. So basically we're starting off on 4 on B flat so that we kind of are used to that feeling, so if we want to move on to another octave, that is not difficult for us. Now often when I'm playing the scale, I'll find myself starting off with 2 on B flat, and then when I end up here I will end on 4 and then head back down. And if I wanted to move out to another octave, of course from here I would tuck my thumb under on 4 to get up to the next C above here and then head up. But I often find myself, like I said, starting on 2 on B flat, which I don't really know if that's technically wrong, but it's what I do a lot. But you could probably do it either way. The sheet music here though says to start it with 4 on B flat, which probably is the better way to do it, to be completely honest, because as I said, you end on 4, and then if you're used to already playing 4 on B flat, moving up to a second octave is much easier. But anyway, starting off with 4 on B flat, we then play a thumb on C, then we head up to E flat. Again, we have 2 flats, and then we want to tuck our thumb under to F, then head up to B flat, and then head back down to F. From here, we'd cross our middle finger over to E flat, head back down to C, and then depending on what fingering we'd want to use, if you're using this fingering, you want to cross your fourth finger over to B flat, or if you're using my fingering, you'd want to cross your second finger over to B flat. In the left hand, of course, again, we'd start off with B flat. We would then head up to D. We'd cross our fourth finger over to E flat. Then we'd head up here to A. And then from here, we'd cross our middle finger over to reach B flat. And then we'd tuck our thumb back under, back down to A, head down to F. Actually, we'd head down to E flat before we do any kind of a fingering change. From here, we would then tuck our thumb underneath, and then we'd head right back down to B flat. So that is a quick overview of the fingering and the look of the sheet music on the look of the notes on the sheet music for B flat major. So now let's show you how it sounds on the keyboard. So now let me show you how B flat major is going to work on the piano keys. Now, as I said earlier, we're going to want to start off with our right hand with our fourth finger on B flat. From here, we tuck our thumb under to C. We head up to E flat. We tuck our thumb under to F. And from here we head up to the high B flat. Then we head back down. We cross our middle finger over to E flat. Then we head to C. And then we cross our fourth finger over to B flat. So that's how the sheet music says to play the B flat major scale. But as I said earlier, I often find myself starting off with 2 at the bottom in the right hand, which would work like this. Everything else is the same, but I end and start with 2, which I personally find to work a lot easier. I think both of these fingerings, starting off with 4 or starting off with 2, I think they both work just fine, and I find that starting off with 2 is just a little bit easier and is a little bit more normal than starting off with 4, and then the immediate thing you do in the scale is tucking your thumb under. Now, as I said, the reason that that's written in the sheet music is because when you get to the top, as you can see, when you get to the top of the scale, you end on B flat. So then from here, if you wanted to move up, you'd want to tuck your thumb under to C, and then head up the rest of the scale. And so I assume that the people who came up with this, they decided to have you start also on B flat, on 4 on B flat, mostly probably so that you'd get used to that feeling. And so that probably also so that every time you went up the scale and you passed B flat, you'd be doing it in the same way, rather than, oh, when I start off the scale, I start on 2, but then next time I go past B flat, I start with 4 and tuck my thumb under. That's probably just why, but as I said, usually when I'm practicing the scale through, I'll often start up with my second finger. Now, the left hand here for B flat is a little bit more normal than starting off with your fourth finger and immediately tucking your thumb under. We start off with our middle finger on B flat. Then we want to play C with our second finger, then D with our thumb. From here, we cross our fourth finger over to E flat. Then we head up to A. Then we cross our middle finger over to B flat. We head back down to A. Then we go down to E flat. Then we tuck our thumb under, and we go back to B flat. So that's how the fingering in the left hand works. So now I'm going to play it 5 times through with the metronome. I'm going to set the metronome speed to 72, and I'm going to play it as quarter notes at 72. And I'm also going to be using the fingering that the sheet music says, which is starting off with my left hand, with my right hand with the fourth finger as the bottom note. So let's do that. Here is the second time. Third time. Fourth time. Fifth time. Now, I'd imagine that playing the B-flat major scale for many of you is going to be a bit of a challenge, partly because of the very strange fingering that is used for a lot of it. For example, I found that doing the whole crossing over to 4, but then starting off with 4 in the right hand is rather difficult. And also, I find that, for me at least, starting off with 2 in the right hand just somehow makes the scale easier. It makes it easier to coordinate everything rather than starting off with 4. It somehow makes the scale more awkward, probably because I'm not used to playing it starting off with 4, and if I practice a bit more on starting off with 4, that would be a bit easier, but that's just what I find. I find starting off with the second finger makes it a little bit more like the other scales that we've worked on so far, and therefore it is a bit easier. Now, one thing I also wanted to mention is that I am doing the B-flat major a bit out of order. I originally was doing all of these scales around the circle of fifths, so I started off with C, then the next one I did was G, then after that I did D, then after that I did A. And I'm doing B-flat major out of order because one of the songs that I want to teach coming up real soon here is in the key of G minor, which is the relative of B-flat major, which I'm going to talk about in just a little bit here, but I just wanted to also say that's why I'm doing B-flat major out of order. But now let me show you how contrary motion for B-flat major works. I'll show you it on the sheet music, and then I'll show you it on the keyboard. So this half of the sheet music over here is for the contrary motion of B-flat major. And so basically the way contrary motion works is the right hand is exactly the same as the left hand is for parallel motion. We've already talked about parallel motion, so I'm not going to mention the right hand here for contrary motion. But what I am going to do is I'm going to talk about the left hand down here for contrary, because it is actually much different from the left hand for the parallel motion. But basically what's happening is, in a way, it's exactly the same, but we're simply starting on a different note. As you can see, we're starting here on the high B flat instead of the low B flat over here. So basically heading back down for the first half of the contrary motion scale is the same as heading back down the parallel motion scale. As you can see, we have 3 on B flat, we have thumb on A, we've got a second finger on G, we've got 3 on F, we've got 4 on E flat, we've got 1 on D, we've got 2 on C, and then we have 3 on B flat. So basically heading back down here is exactly the same as heading back down here. You're just starting off with heading down from the top instead of heading up from the bottom. So it has a much different feel as well as a much different sound. And likewise, heading up from the bottom of the contrary motion is exactly the same as heading up from the bottom of the parallel motion. If you take a look at the fingering there, you'll see that it is actually exactly the same. So let's check out contrary motion on the keyboard. As I said, the right hand is exactly the same as the right hand for parallel motion, so I'm not even going to talk about that here, but what I am going to show you is how the left hand works. Now, if you remember correctly from before, when we were doing parallel motion, we'd start off with 3 in the bottom, and then when we got up to the top, we would have our thumb on A, we would cross our middle finger over to B flat, and then we'd head back down to A. And that's exactly how the top of the scale, the beginning of it, works in contrary, because we're starting at the top. So what we're going to want to do for the left hand in our contrary motion is start off with our middle finger on B flat. Then we want to play A with our thumb. We're going to want to play G with our second finger, F with our middle finger, E flat with the fourth, tuck the thumb under, play D, and then head to B flat. Head back up, fourth finger on E flat, head up to A, and then cross the middle finger over to B flat once again, just like we did for the parallel motion. Now, where things get really interesting is when we add both hands together, and this is another reason why I find the fingering that the sheet music here has written very strange, because if you want to play your fourth finger on B flat, as your sheet music says, the sheet music also says to play your middle finger on the same B flat when playing contrary motion. Now, you could override this by playing the contrary motion an octave apart, starting down here and then moving in opposite directions. But the sheet music says to play them on the same note, and then basically your hands are like merging together. They're eating each other when you're starting with the fourth finger on B flat and with the middle finger on B flat as well in the left hand. When you start off with second finger in the right hand, your hands still kind of are eating each other a little bit, but it's not as bad, and I find playing contrary motion with the second finger starting off to be a lot easier, mostly because your hands aren't trying to become one with each other. So that's just something that I wanted to point out, which is a bit of a benefit with starting off with the second finger rather than the fourth finger and having this kind of crazy stuff happen. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to play contrary motion along with the metronome 5 times through, just like I did with parallel motion, at the same speed of 72 beats per minute. This is the metronome I'm using, by the way. You can use literally any metronome you want as long as it makes a nice, steady, even clicking sound, and it works as it's supposed to. But this is what I'm going to use, and let's play contrary motion through 5 times at 72. So that is how contrary motion for B flat major will work, doing it with both hands. Now, if you're trying to do this at home and you're getting upset because it's really difficult, don't worry. This one is actually rather difficult because of the strange fingering, and also because we have 2 flats, and that's just going to be a bit different than what we've already worked on, and it's just going to be rather difficult to coordinate your hands. So what I would say for practicing contrary motion, if you really want to practice it, first of all, you'd probably want to start doing the contrary motion only after you get really good at playing the B flat major scale in parallel motion. Only after you get really good at playing it in parallel should you start working on playing it in contrary motion. And then when you do start playing it in contrary, if you get really confused and you get disoriented and you're finding that you're playing the wrong fingers on the wrong notes or the wrong notes at the wrong time, what I would suggest doing is playing each note, certainly for the first few times through, or until you get rather comfortable with the scale, playing each note as slowly as you need to, and then checking to make sure you have every finger in the right spot before moving on to the next one. So for example here, this is one I find rather tricky, to play the 4th finger on E flat as you tuck the thumb under on the right hand to F. Make sure everything is good there, you're playing the right notes at the right time, and then move on to the next note. That's something that I think would probably help some of you if you're having a difficult time with the contrary motion for B flat major, because it is rather tricky. So just wanted to point that out. If any of you guys are having trouble with it, just feel free to take it as slow as you need to, and make sure to check that you're playing the right notes at the right times with the right fingers. But now I think I will show you how to get the relative minor of B flat major, and also a little bit of how that works. So basically, when you're playing any major scale, there's two ways to find what the relative minor of that scale is. And as I said, there are two ways, and either way works just as well. It really just matters which one you prefer and which one you find easier to do. The first one, the one I often find myself using, is the method of finding the sixth note in the major scale and then playing the same order of notes from the major scale, except starting on that note. So if we take B flat major, we start off with B flat. We go to C. This is our second note here. C is a second. 3, 4, 5, 6. So G is the sixth note from the B flat major scale. So in order to play the relative minor, which is G minor, what we want to do is start off on G and then play all of the notes from the B flat major scale, except that we start on G and we end on G. I'm going to play this an octave lower so you can see everything I'm doing. But we start on G, we go up, we play a B flat because that's in B flat major scale. And you can even think about from here on up to G, we just play the B flat major scale. But we stop on G because we're in G minor now. We head back down. As you can see there, we have all the same notes from the B flat major scale, except we're starting and ending on G major. On G. We're playing G minor, but we're starting and ending on G. And as you can hear, it has a much different sound than B flat major, even though it actually contains all of the same notes. And that's because of the pattern of half steps and whole steps that are found in the minor scale. It gives it a much different sound. Now, I mentioned that there are two ways of finding the relative minor, and there are two ways. The second way that I often will use is where you start on the root of the scale, which in this case is B flat. We're in the key of B flat. We're playing the B flat major scale, so B flat is our root. And from here, we head 3 half steps down from whatever our root is. So since we're in B flat, we want to go 1 half step down, 2 half steps down, and then the third half step that we land on, as you can see, is a G. And so that is just another way to find the relative minor of any major scale. As I said, that works with every major scale. So if you're in a major key and you're wondering what the relative minor is, you can either go 3 half steps down from the root, or you can find the sixth note of the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Either way ends you up with the same note, and then you will know what the minor key is. Hopefully you found this video on the daily scales to be informative and helpful for you, whether you're a beginning piano student or someone who knows a little bit about how to play music and they want to become better at what they do. Scales are really helpful for all of that. It doesn't really matter what type of music you want to play or what you want to do with your musical skills, whether you just want to learn more classical pieces and play them, or compose brand new music of your own, or improvise and play solos. Playing scales and knowing music theory like that really helps you do all of that. And so if you're watching these videos and learning and practicing on your scales every day, it's a really great help. So hopefully you found this video informative and helpful. Like I said, if you want, you can go check out the rest of the video series, and also if you want to subscribe and hit that button up there on the right hand side of the screen, make sure to do that, because I'm going to have lots of cool videos of really simple classical music from some of these awesome books here from the 1800s. So if that sounds cool and you want to learn how to play some really fun, simple Bach pieces, make sure to stay tuned, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.